Hey, hi guys. In today's lesson, we're going to see verbs in the indefinite past, part 3. Okay, if you want to check verbs in the indefinite past, part 2 and part 1, you can check the videos below. And also, if you want to check the indefinite past, it's very important, okay, for you to understand this lesson. So, let's start with this part 3 of verbs in the indefinite past, okay? First, we have regular verbs ending with AR, ar. Okay, remember, when we have regular verbs, that means that the root word is not going to change, okay? So, if you have the personal pronoun I, which means yo, in Spanish, the ending of your regular verb in the indefinite past is going to be in letter E with an accent, e, okay? According to the personal pronoun yo. Now, if you have the personal pronoun you, which means tú, the ending of your verb will be with aste, okay? Have that in mind. Now, if you have the personal pronouns he, which means él in Spanish, she, which means ella, it, which means eso, then your regular verb is going to end with letter O with an accent, okay? O, okay? Third personal pronouns. And now if you have the personal pronoun we, which means nosotros in Spanish, then the ending of your verb will be with amos, okay? Now, if you have the personal pronoun you in the plural form, which means ustedes in Spanish, then the ending of your verb would be with aron, okay? The same with the personal pronoun they, which means ellos if you're talking about a group of boys, or ellas if you are talking about a group of girls, and then the ending of your verb will be with aron, okay? So let's start with this verb, which means to prepare, okay? To prepare in Spanish means preparar. So let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past according to the personal pronouns, okay? So if you want to say I prepared in the indefinite past, in Spanish you have to say yo, okay, which means I. Yo prepared, preparé. Yo preparé. Okay, see, the root word is prepar, okay? It's the word in white. And then the ending, it's according to the personal pronoun you have. If you have the personal pronoun I, yo, then the ending is with letter E with an accent, okay? Yo preparé. Now, if you want to say you prepared in Spanish, you have to say tú preparaste. Okay, see the root word, it's exactly the same. That's why it's a regular verb, okay? And it's ending with aste, okay, the word in red, because you're talking about the personal pronoun you, which means tú in Spanish, okay? Now, if you want to say he prepared, then you have to say in Spanish, él preparó. Okay, now to say she prepared, you have to say ella preparó. And then if you want to say it prepared, you have to say eso preparó. As you see, we're talking about third personal pronouns, so the ending with these three personal pronouns, he, él, she, ella, and it. Eso, the ending, we have to write its letter O with an accent, okay? Él preparó, ella preparó, eso preparó. okay? Now, if you want to say we prepared, then you have to say nosotros preparamos. Nosotros preparamos, okay? Amos, nosotros, okay? Root word, prepar, okay? Now, if you want to say you prepared in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes prepararon. Ustedes prepararon, okay? In the indefinite past. Now, if you want to say they prepared, you have to say ellos prepararon if you're talking about a group of boys, or ellas prepararon if you are talking about a group of girls, okay? Remember that. So now let's go to another verb, regular verb. We have to cook, okay? To cook in Spanish means cocinar. Cocinar, okay? So now let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past in Spanish, okay? If you want to say I cooked, in Spanish you have to say yo cociné. Yo cociné. Now to say you cooked, you have to say tú cocinaste. Tú cocinaste. If you want to say he cooked, you have to say él cocinó. Él cocinó. To say she cooked, you have to say ella cocinó. Ella cocinó. To say it cooked, you have to say eso cocinó. Eso cocinó. Okay, to say we cooked, you have to say nosotros cocinamos. Nosotros cocinamos. Okay, the root word is cocin. And then the ending, according to the personal pronoun, we have, okay? Now, if you want to say you cooked in the plural form, in Spanish you have to say ustedes cocinaron. Ustedes cocinaron. And then if you want to say they cooked, you have to say ellos cocinaron. If you are talking about a group of boys, ellos cocinaron. And if you are talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas cocinaron. Ellas cocinaron, okay? Now the next verb we have is to imagine, okay? To imagine means imaginar. Imaginar, okay? Now let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past, okay, in Spanish. So if you want to say I imagined, you have to say yo imaginé. Yo imaginé, okay? Now, if you want to say you imagined, you have to say tú imaginaste. Tú imaginaste. Okay, check the root word. The word that is not changing, it's imagine. Okay, it's the same in all the personal pronouns. That's why it's regular. And then the ending changes according to the personal pronoun we have. Okay, now if you want to say he imagined, you have to say él imaginó. Él imaginó. To say she imagined, you have to say ella imaginó. Ella imaginó. To say it imagined, you have to say eso imaginó. Eso imaginó. To say we imagined, you have to say nosotros imaginamos. Nosotros imaginamos. To say you imagined in the plural form, in Spanish you have to say ustedes imaginaron. Ustedes imaginaron. And then if you want to say they imagined, you have to say, if you're talking about a group of men, you have to say ellos imaginaron. Ellos imaginaron. And if you're talking about a group of women, then you have to say ellas imaginaron. Ellas imaginaron. All right, so now the next verb we have is to create. Okay, to create in Spanish means crear. Crear. So let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past, okay? If you want to say I created, you have to say Yo creé. Yo creé. Okay, see the root word, it's cree. Okay, and then the ending, according to the personal pronoun you have, in this case, it's ending with letter E with an accent because you have the personal pronoun yo. Okay, yo. Now, if you want to say you created, you have to say tú creaste. Tú creaste. To say he created, you have to say él creó. Él creó. To say she created, you have to say ella creó. Ella creó. To say it created, you have to say eso creó. Eso creó. To say we created, you have to say nosotros creamos. Nosotros creamos. To say you created in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes crearon. Ustedes crearon. And then if you want to say they created, you have to say, if you're talking about a group of girls, ellas crearon. Ellas crearon. And if you're talking about a group of boys, ellos crearon. Ellos crearon. Now the next verb we have is to love. Okay, to love in Spanish means amar. Amar. Okay, so let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past in Spanish. Okay, so if you want to say I loved, you have to say yo amé. Yo amé. Okay, the ending it's with e. Yo amé. If you want to say you loved, then you have to say tú amaste. Tú amaste. Okay, see the root word here, it's am. And then the ending according to your personal pronoun. If you want to say he loved, you have to say él amó. Él amó. If you want to say she loved, ella amó. Ella amó. To say it loved, you have to say eso amó. Eso amó. To say we loved, you have to say nosotros amamos. Nosotros amamos. To say you loved in the plural form in Spanish, you have to say ustedes amaron. Ustedes amaron. And then if you want to say they loved, if you are referring to a group of boys, you have to say ellos amaron. Ellos amaron. And if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas amaron. Ellas amaron. Now the next verb we have is to buy. Okay, to buy something in Spanish means comprar. Comprar. Okay, so let's see how you have to conjugate this regular verb ending with AR in Spanish. Okay, if you want to say I bought, you have to say yo compré. Yo compré. If you want to say you bought, you have to say tú compraste. Tú compraste. Okay, if you want to say he bought, you have to say él compró. Él compró. If you want to say she bought, you have to say ella compró. Ella compró. If you want to say it bought, you have to say eso compró. Eso compró. Okay? If you want to say we bought, you have to say nosotros compramos. Nosotros compramos. If you want to say you bought in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes compraron. Ustedes compraron. And then if you want to say they bought, then you have to say, if you're talking about a group of boys, ellos compraron. Ellos compraron. And if you are talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas compraron. Ellas compraron. Okay, so now let's go to the next verb we have, to steal. Okay, to steal in Spanish means robar. Robar. Okay, so let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past. Okay, if you want to say I stole, I stole, you have to say yo robé. Yo robé. Okay, now if you want to say you stole, then you have to say tú robaste. Tú robaste. To say he stole, you have to say él robó. Él robó. To say she stole, you have to say ella robó. Ella robó. To say it stole, you have to say eso robó. Eso robó. To say we stole, you have to say nosotros robamos. Nosotros robamos. If you want to say you stole in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes robaron. Ustedes robaron. And then if you want to say they stole, you have to say ellos robaron. Okay, they stole if you are talking about a group of boys. Ellos robaron. And then if you are talking about a group of girls, you have to say ellas robaron. Ellas robaron. Now let's see this verb to reply or to answer, okay? If you want to say this, you have to say contestar. Contestar, okay? Remember, it's regular verb. So let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. So if you want to say I answered or I replied, in Spanish you have to say yo contesté. Yo contesté. Okay? Now, if you want to say you replied or you answered, then you have to say tú contestaste. Tú contestaste. Okay? Check the root word, the word in white. Okay? Is contest. And then the ending according to the personal pronoun you have. Okay? Remember that always. Tú contestaste. You answered or you replied. To say he answered or he replied, you have to say él contestó. Él contestó. If you want to say she replied or she answered, you have to say ella contestó. Ella contestó. To say it answered or it replied, you have to say eso contestó. Eso contestó. Now to say we answered or we replied, you have to say nosotros contestamos. Nosotros contestamos. If you want to say you answered or you replied in the plural form, in Spanish you have to say ustedes contestaron. Ustedes contestaron. And then if you want to say they answered or they replied, you have to say ellos contestaron. If you are talking about a group of boys, ellos contestaron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas contestaron. Ellas contestaron. Okay, so now the next verb we have is to row. Okay, to row in Spanish means remar. Remar. So let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past, okay? So if you want to say I rowed, indefinite past in Spanish would be yo remé. Yo remé. Okay, as you can see, the root word in all the personal pronouns is rem. Okay, and the ending is with letter E with an accent because your personal pronoun is yo, I. Okay? If you want to say you rowed, you have to say tú remaste. Tú remaste. Now to say he rowed, you have to say él remó. Él remó. To say she rowed, you have to say ella remó. Ella remó. To say it rowed, you have to say eso remó. Eso remó. To say we rowed, you have to say nosotros remamos. Nosotros remamos. If you want to say you rowed in the plural form, you have to say in Spanish, ustedes remaron. Ustedes remaron. And if you want to say they rowed In Spanish, you have to say, if you're talking about a group of boys, ellos remaron. Ellos remaron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, ellas remaron. Ellas remaron. Now let's see another verb. This verb is to swim, okay? To swim means in Spanish, nadar. Nadar. Okay, let's see how you have to conjugate this. In the indefinite past, if you want to say I swam, then you have to say yo nadé. Yo nadé. Okay, the root word is nad. Yo nadé. If you want to say you swam, you have to say tú nadaste. Tú nadaste. To say he swam, you have to say él nadó. Él nadó. To say she swam, you have to say ella nadó. Ella nadó. To say it swam, you have to say eso nadó. Eso nadó. And now to say we swam, you have to say nosotros nadamos. Nosotros nadamos. To say you swam, in the plural form, you have to say ustedes nadaron. Ustedes nadaron. And then if you want to say they swam, you have to say ellos nadaron. If you're talking about a group of boys, ellos nadaron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, you have to say ellas nadaron. Ellas nadaron. Now I have this verb to dive. Okay, to dive means bucear. Bucear in Spanish. Let's see how you have to conjugate this. In the indefinite past, if you want to say I dived, then you have to say yo buceé. Yo buceé. If you want to say you dived, you have to say tú buceaste. Tú buceaste. Okay, check the root word. The word that is not changing, it's buce. Buce. Okay, and then the ending according to your personal pronoun, okay? In this case, it's ending with aste because you have the personal pronoun you, tú. Tú buceaste. Okay, if you want to say he dived, you have to say él buceó. Él buceó. To say she dived, you have to say ella buceó. Ella buceó. To say it dived, you have to say eso buceó. Eso buceó. To say we dived, you have to say nosotros buceamos. Nosotros buceamos. Now to say you dived, in the plural form, you have to say ustedes bucearon. Ustedes bucearon. And then to say they dived, you have to say, if you're talking about a group of boys, ellos bucearon. Ellos bucearon. And if you're talking about a group of girls, ellas bucearon. Ellas bucearon. Now I have this verb to sing. Okay, to sing means in Spanish, cantar. Cantar. Let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. Okay, so if you want to say I sang, you have to say yo canté. Yo canté. If you want to say you sang, you have to say tú cantaste. Tú cantaste. To say he sang, you have to say él cantó. Él cantó. To say she sang, you have to say ella cantó. Ella cantó. To say it sang, you have to say eso cantó. Eso cantó. To say we sang, you have to say nosotros cantamos. Nosotros cantamos. To say you sang, in the plural form, you have to say ustedes cantaron. Ustedes cantaron. And then if you want to say they sang, you have to say ellos cantaron. If you are referring to a group of boys, ellos cantaron. Or ellas cantaron, if you are referring to a group of girls, okay? Ellas cantaron. Ellas cantaron. Now I have this verb to rehearse, okay? If you want to say to rehearse, in Spanish you have to say ensayar. Ensayar. Let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past, okay? In Spanish, if you want to say I rehearsed, then you have to say yo ensayé. Yo ensayé. If you want to say you rehearsed, then you have to say tú ensayaste. Tú ensayaste. To say he rehearsed, you have to say él ensayó. Él ensayó. To say she rehearsed, you have to say ella ensayó. Ella ensayó. To say it rehearsed, you have to say eso ensayó. Eso ensayó. To say we rehearsed, you have to say nosotros ensayamos. Nosotros ensayamos. If you want to say you rehearsed, in the plural form you have to say ustedes ensayaron. Ustedes ensayaron. And then if you want to say they rehearsed, if you are talking about a group of boys, you have to say ellos ensayaron. Ellos ensayaron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas ensayaron. Ellas ensayaron. Now let's go to the next verb. Okay, we have to award. To award means premiar. Okay, premiar in Spanish. Now let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. Alright, so if you want to say I awarded, okay, the indefinite past, in Spanish you have to say yo premié. Yo premié. Okay, check the root word. The word that is not changing, it's premi. Okay, and then the ending according to your personal pronoun. Okay, now if you want to say you awarded, you have to say tú premiaste. Tú premiaste. Okay, if you want to say he awarded, you have to say él premió. Él premió. To say she awarded, you have to say ella premió. Ella premió. To say it awarded, you have to say eso premió. Eso premió. To say we awarded, you have to say nosotros premiamos. Nosotros premiamos. To say you awarded in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes premiaron. Ustedes premiaron. And then if you want to say they awarded, you have to say ellos premiaron. If you are talking about a group of boys, ellos premiaron. And ellas premiaron if you are talking about a group of girls. Okay, ellas premiaron. So now let's go to the next verb, okay? To spell, okay? To spell in Spanish means deletrear. Deletrear. And let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. Okay, so if you want to say I spelled, you have to say yo deletré. Yo deletré. Okay, see the root word is deletré and then E with an accent. Yo deletré. Okay, if you want to say you spelled, then you have to say tú deletreaste. Tú deletreaste. To say he spelled, you have to say él deletreó. Él deletreó. To say she spelled, you have to say ella deletreó. Ella deletreó. To say it spelled, you have to say eso deletreó. Eso deletreó. To say we spelled, you have to say nosotros deletreamos. Nosotros deletreamos. To say you spelled, in the plural form, you have to say ustedes deletrearon. Ustedes deletrearon. And then to say they spelled, if you're talking about a group of boys, you have to say ellos deletrearon. Ellos deletrearon. And if you want to say the same, but if you're talking about a group of girls, you have to say, ellas deletrearon. Ellas deletrearon. All right, so now we have this verb to check or to review, okay? To check or to review means revisar, revisar in Spanish. Let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past in Spanish. If you want to say I reviewed or I checked, in Spanish you have to say yo revisé, yo revisé. If you want to say you checked or you reviewed, you have to say in Spanish, tú revisaste, tú revisaste. If you want to say he reviewed or he checked, you have to say, él revisó, él revisó. Okay? See, the word that is not changing is revis. Okay, now if you want to say she reviewed or she checked, you have to say, ella revisó, ella revisó. Now to say it checked or it reviewed, you have to say, eso revisó, eso revisó. Now if you want to say we reviewed or we checked, you have to say, nosotros revisamos, nosotros revisamos. Then if you want to say you checked or you reviewed, in Spanish you have to say ustedes revisaron, ustedes revisaron, okay? And then if you want to say they reviewed or they checked, you have to say ellos revisaron, ellos revisaron, if you're talking about a group of boys, or ellas revisaron, ellas revisaron, if you are talking about a group of girls, okay? Now the next verb we have is to save or to keep, okay? In Spanish means guardar, guardar. So let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past. If you want to say I saved or I kept, then you have to say yo guardé, yo guardé. If you want to say you saved or you kept, in Spanish you have to say tú guardaste, tú guardaste. Okay, if you want to say he checked or he kept, you have to say él guardó, él guardó. To say she saved or she kept, you have to say ella guardó, ella guardó. To say it saved or it kept, you have to say eso guardó, eso guardó. Now to say we kept or we saved, we have to say nosotros guardamos, nosotros guardamos. Now to say you kept in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes guardaron, ustedes guardaron. And then if you want to say they kept or they saved, if you are referring to a group of boys, then you have to say ellos guardaron, ellos guardaron. If you are referring to, remember, group of boys, and if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas guardaron, ellas guardaron. Now let's see this verb to work. Okay, to work means trabajar, trabajar. So let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. Okay, so if you want to say I worked, then you have to say yo trabajé, yo trabajé. If you want to say you worked, you have to say tú trabajaste, tú trabajaste. To say he worked, you have to say él trabajó, él trabajó. If you want to say she worked, you have to say ella trabajó, ella trabajó. If you want to say it worked, then you have to say eso trabajó, eso trabajó. To say we worked, you have to say Nosotros trabajamos. Nosotros trabajamos. If you want to say you worked in the plural form, you have to say ustedes trabajaron. Ustedes trabajaron. And then if you want to say they worked, if you're referring to a group of boys, you have to say ellos trabajaron. Ellos trabajaron. And then if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas trabajaron. Ellas trabajaron. Now let's see another verb, to inject. Okay, to inject in Spanish means inyectar. Inyectar. So let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past. Okay, if you want to say I injected, then you have to say yo inyecté. Yo inyecté. To say you injected, you have to say tú inyectaste. Tú inyectaste. To say he injected, you have to say él inyectó. Él inyectó. To say she injected, you have to say ella inyectó. Ella inyectó. To say it injected, you have to say eso inyectó. Eso inyectó. Now let's go with the personal pronoun we. If you want to say we injected, in Spanish you have to say nosotros inyectamos. Nosotros inyectamos. Then if you want to say you injected in the plural form, in Spanish in the indefinite past, you have to say ustedes inyectaron. Ustedes inyectaron. And then if you want to say they injected, in Spanish you have to say, if you are referring to a group of boys, ellos inyectaron. Ellos inyectaron. And if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas inyectaron. Ellas inyectaron. Now let's go to this verb to toast. Okay, to toast means tostar. Tostar. Okay, so now let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. If you want to say I toasted, in Spanish you have to say yo tosté. Yo tosté. If you want to say you toasted, you have to say tú tostaste. Tú tostaste. If you want to say he toasted, you have to say él tostó. Él tostó. If you want to say she toasted, you have to say ella tostó. Ella tostó. To say it toasted, you have to say eso tostó. Eso tostó. Okay? If you want to say we toasted, you have to say nosotros tostamos. Nosotros tostamos. If you want to say you toasted in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes tostaron. Ustedes tostaron. And then if you want to say they toasted, in Spanish, if you are referring to a group of boys, then you have to say ellos tostaron. Ellos tostaron. And if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas tostaron. Ellas tostaron. Now let's go to this verb to act. Okay, to act means in Spanish actuar. Actuar. So let's see how you have to conjugate this verb, actuar, in Spanish in the indefinite past. Okay, so if you want to say I acted, indefinite past, in Spanish you have to say yo actué. Yo actué. To say you acted, you have to say tú actuaste. Tú actuaste. Okay, see the root word is actu. Okay? If you want to say he acted, then you have to say él actuó. Él actuó. To say she acted, you have to say ella actuó. Ella actuó. To say it acted, you have to say eso actuó. Eso actuó. To say we acted, you have to say nosotros actuamos. Nosotros actuamos. To say you acted in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes actuaron. Ustedes actuaron. And then if you want to say they acted, If you are referring to a group of boys, you have to say ellos actuaron. Ellos actuaron. And if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas actuaron. Ellas actuaron. Now let's go to this verb, to change. Okay, to change in Spanish means cambiar. Cambiar. So let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past. Okay, if you want to say I changed, then you have to say yo cambié. Yo cambié. If you want to say you changed, then you have to say tú cambiaste. Tú cambiaste. To say he changed, then you have to say él cambió. Él cambió. To say she changed, you have to say ella cambió. Ella cambió. To say it changed, you have to say eso cambió. Eso cambió. To say we changed, then you have to say nosotros cambiamos. Nosotros cambiamos. Then to say you changed, in the plural form, you have to say ustedes cambiaron. Ustedes cambiaron. And then to say they changed, if you are referring to a group of boys, you have to say ellos cambiaron. Ellos cambiaron. And then if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas cambiaron. Ellas cambiaron. Okay, so now let's go to this verb to sigh. Okay, to sigh means to... that means suspirar. Okay, suspirar, to sigh. Now let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past. Okay, so if you want to say I sighed, then you have to say yo suspiré. Okay, this will be the indefinite past. Yo suspiré. Yo suspiré. Now to say you sighed, you have to say tú suspiraste. Tú suspiraste. To say he sighed, you have to say él suspiró. Él suspiró. To say she sighed, you have to say ella suspiró. Ella suspiró. To say it sighed, you have to say eso suspiró. Eso suspiró. To say we sighed, you have to say nosotros suspiramos. Nosotros suspiramos. To say you sighed in the plural form, then you have to say in Spanish, ustedes suspiraron. Ustedes suspiraron. And then if you want to say they sighed, then you have to say, if you're talking about a group of boys, ellos suspiraron. Ellos suspiraron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas suspiraron. Ellas suspiraron. All right, so that's all about regular verbs. And now let's see irregular verbs ending with AR. Ar. Why are they irregular? Because the ending, sometimes it's not the same. And also the beginning, sometimes it's not the same. Okay, so pay attention to these irregular verbs. So let's start with the first one. We have to practice. Okay, to practice in Spanish means practicar. Practicar. Okay, so remember it's irregular verb, so the beginning, the root word is not going to be the same. Okay, so let's see how you have to conjugate the indefinite past of this verb. Okay, so if you want to say I practiced, in Spanish you have to say yo practiqué. Yo practiqué. And check the root word, the base word is not the same. It changes, okay? The ending of the root word, it's ending with Q, U, okay? And then check the rest. Is it ending with Q, U? No. The others are ending with letter C, okay? So if you want to say I practiced, in Spanish you have to say yo practiqué, okay? And then the ending of the root word is with Q, you, practiqué. Okay, let's go to the other one. If you want to say you practiced, in Spanish you have to say tú practicaste. Tú practicaste. Okay, so the only one changing it's the personal pronoun I, yo. This is the only one that is going to have a different root. Okay, now if you want to say he practiced, you have to say él practicó. Él practicó. To say she practiced, you have to say ella practicó. Ella practicó. To say it practiced, you have to say eso practicó. Eso practicó. To say we practiced, you have to say nosotros practicamos. Nosotros practicamos. If you want to say you practiced in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes practicaron. Ustedes practicaron. And then if you want to say they practiced, then you have to say ellos practicaron. If you are talking about a group of boys, ellos practicaron. Or ellas practicaron if you are talking about a group of girls, okay? Ellas practicaron. Now let's see another irregular verb, okay? To threaten. To threaten in Spanish means amenazar. Amenazar. Okay, so now let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past in Spanish. Okay, so if you want to say I threatened, indefinite past, in Spanish you have to say yo amenacé. Yo amenacé. Okay, check how different this personal pronoun I, the beginning it's different than the other personal pronouns, the root word. Okay, so check that because this is an irregular verb and the only difference it's in the first personal pronoun. Okay, yo amenacé. The ending of the root word, it's letter C. Okay, yo amenacé. Now to say you threatened, in Spanish you have to say tú amenazaste. Tú amenazaste. Okay, and check the ending. Now if you want to say he threatened, then you have to say él amenazó. Él amenazó. To say she threatened, then you have to say ella amenazó. Ella amenazó. To say it threatened, then you have to say eso amenazó. Eso amenazó. To say we threatened, then you have to say nosotros amenazamos. Nosotros amenazamos. To say you threatened in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes amenazaron. Ustedes amenazaron. Now to say they threatened, then you have to say ellos amenazaron. If you are talking about a group of boys, ellos amenazaron. And ellas amenazaron. Ellas amenazaron. If you are talking about a group of girls, okay? Now let's go to this irregular verb to carry or to charge. Okay, it can be to charge your phone or to carry some weight. Okay, it means cargar, cargar in Spanish. Okay, so now let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. So if you want to say I charged or I carried, then you have to say yo cargué. Yo cargué. Okay, this is the only personal pronoun changing the root word. Check. The root word, it's not the same. The only one changing, it's the one with a personal pronoun. Yo, I. Yo cargué. The root word, it's ending with G, U. Okay? The others are only ending with letter G. Check that, okay? Now, if you want to say you charged or you carried, then you have to say tú cargaste. Tú cargaste. To say he charged or he carried, then you have to say él cargó. Él cargó. Now to say she charged or she carried, you have to say ella cargó. Ella cargó. To say it charged or it carried, you have to say eso cargó. Eso cargó. Now to say we charged or we carried, you have to say nosotros cargamos. Nosotros cargamos. Now to say you charged or you carried in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes cargaron. Ustedes cargaron. And then if you want to say they charged or they carried, if you are talking about a group of boys, you have to say ellos cargaron. Ellos cargaron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas cargaron. Ellas cargaron. Now let's see another irregular verb. We have to pay. To pay means pagar. Pagar in Spanish, okay? Let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past, okay? So if you want to say I paid, in Spanish you have to say yo pagué. Yo pagué. Check the root word. It's changing only in this personal pronoun. And the end, it's with letters G, U. Okay, yo pagué. Yo pagué. Now, if you want to say you paid, in Spanish you have to say tú pagaste. Tú pagaste, okay? Check the root word, it's different. And it's not changing in the other personal pronouns, okay? Only the first personal pronoun changes, okay? Now, if you want to say he paid, then you have to say él pagó. Él pagó in Spanish. To say she paid, you have to say ella pagó. Ella pagó. To say it paid, you have to say eso pagó. Eso pagó. To say we paid, you have to say nosotros pagamos. Nosotros pagamos. Now to say you paid in the plural form, you have to say ustedes pagaron. Ustedes pagaron. Now to say they paid, if you're talking about a group of boys, you have to say ellos pagaron. Ellos pagaron. And if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas pagaron. Ellas pagaron. Okay, now let's go to the next irregular verb. We have to explain, okay? To explain means explicar. Explicar. And let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. If you want to say I explained, then you have to say in Spanish, yo expliqué. Yo expliqué. And check the ending, it's QU of the root word. Expliqué. It's ending with QU. And this is the only one changing in this verb, okay? Just this personal pronoun I, which means yo. Yo expliqué. Then the rest of the personal pronouns are having the same root word, okay? Now, if you want to say you explained, then you have to say tú explicaste. Tú explicaste. Okay? To say he explained, then you have to say él explicó. Él explicó. To say she explained, you have to say ella explicó. Ella explicó. To say it explained, you have to say eso explicó. Eso explicó. To say we explained, you have to say nosotros explicamos. Nosotros explicamos. To say you explained, you have to say ustedes explicaron. Ustedes explicaron, okay, in the plural form. And then if you want to say they explained, if you are talking about a group of boys, you have to say ellos explicaron. Ellos explicaron. And if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas explicaron. Ellas explicaron. Now let's go to the next verb, to snore. Okay, to snore means roncar. Roncar. Okay, so let's see how you have to conjugate this irregular verb in the indefinite past. So if you want to say I snored, then you have to say yo ronqué. Yo ronqué. And check the root word, it's ending with Q, U. Ronqué. Ronqué. This is the only one changing. Again, the root word, it's changing only in the personal pronoun I, yo. Okay? Now, if you want to say you snored, then you have to say tú roncaste. Tú roncaste. Okay, see the root word, it's not ending with QU. The root word, it's ending with letter C. Roncaste. Okay? If you want to say he snored, then you have to say él roncó. Okay, the root word, it's the same. Check. In the only personal pronoun that is not the same, it's in the personal pronoun I, yo. Okay? If you want to say he snored, you have to say él roncó. Él roncó. To say she snored, you have to say ella roncó. Ella roncó. To say it snored, you have to say eso roncó. Eso roncó. To say we snored, you have to say nosotros roncamos. Nosotros roncamos. To say you snored in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes roncaron. Ustedes roncaron. And then if you want to say they snored, then you have to say ellos roncaron. If you're talking about a group of boys, ellos roncaron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, ellas roncaron. Ellas roncaron. All right, so that's all about irregular verbs ending with R. And now let's see some regular verbs ending with ER. Okay? The endings of these verbs, remember, we are going to put this ending according to the personal pronouns we have, okay? So if you have the personal pronoun I, yo, the ending will be in the indefinite past with letter I with an accent, okay? E. If you have the personal pronoun you, tú, in Spanish, then the ending would be with iste. Okay, if you have the personal pronouns he, él, she, ella, it, eso, the third persons, then your verb is going to end with letter I and O with an accent. Io. Okay? If you have your personal pronoun we, which means nosotros, then the ending of your verb will be imos. Okay? Then if you have the personal pronoun you in the plural form, which means ustedes, okay, the ending of your verb would be with hieron. Okay? The same with the personal pronoun they, which means ellos, if you are talking about a group of boys, or ellas, if you are talking about a group of girls, okay? And the ending would be in hieron. All right, so now let's see some regular verbs ending with ER, okay? We have this. If you want to say to sell, in Spanish you have to say vender. Okay, so now let's see how you have to conjugate this verb, vender, in the indefinite past in Spanish. Okay, so if you want to say I sold, in Spanish you have to say yo vendí. Okay, and check. You have your personal pronoun yo, which means I, and then the root word. If it's regular verb, it's going to be the same in all the personal pronouns, okay? check the root word is the same. Yes, because it's regular verb. And then the ending is going to be with letter I with an accent because we are talking about the personal pronoun I, yo. Okay, so we have to put this ending. Yo vendí. Yo vendí. Okay? Now, if you want to say you sold, then you have to say tú vendiste. Tú vendiste. Okay, the ending, it's with iste because we're talking about the personal pronoun you, which means tú. Okay? Now, if you're talking about the personal pronoun he sold, then you have to say él vendió. Él vendió. Okay? If you want to say she sold, then you have to say ella vendió. Ella vendió. Okay, it's ending with I-O. I and O with an accent. Okay? If you want to say it sold, then you have to say eso vendió. Eso vendió. To say we sold, then you have to say nosotros vendimos. Nosotros vendimos. Okay? If you want to say you sold in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes vendieron. Ustedes vendieron. Okay? Now to say they sold, in Spanish you have to say, if you're talking about a group of boys, ellos vendieron. Ellos vendieron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas vendieron. Ellas vendieron. Okay? Now let's go to another regular verb ending with ER, okay? To say smell, smell. In Spanish, you have to say oler, oler. Okay, so let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past, okay? So if you want to say I smelled, then you have to say yo olí, yo olí. Okay, the root word, it's the same, check, and then the ending, it's according to the personal pronoun you have, okay? In this case, you have personal pronoun I, yo. The ending would be with letter I with an accent, okay? Yo olí, yo olí. Now, to say you smelled, then you have to say tú oliste, tú oliste. Now, to say he smelled, you have to say él olió, él olió. Okay? To say she smelled, then you have to say ella olió. Ella olió. If you want to say it smelled, you have to say eso olió. Eso olió. To say we smelled, you have to say nosotros olimos. Nosotros olimos. To say you smelled in the plural form, then you have to say in Spanish ustedes olieron. Ustedes olieron. And then if you want to say they smelled, then you have to say ellos olieron. If you are talking about a group of men, ellos olieron. And if you're talking about a group of women, then you have to say ellas olieron. Ellas olieron. Okay, that's all about regular verbs ending with ER, Now let's see irregular verbs ending with ER, Okay, let's check the first one, to make or to do. Okay, in Spanish means hacer, hacer, to make, to do. So let's see how you have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past. Okay, so if you want to say I did or I made, then you have to say in Spanish yo hice, yo hice. Okay, as you can see, the root word is not the same, and the root word is not the same in the first personal pronoun. In the second personal pronoun, it's just the same in the third persons, as you can see. And also, it's changing in the other personal pronouns, but it's the same in the personal pronouns nosotros, we, ustedes, you in the plural form, ellos or ellas, they, and then it's the same, okay? Check that. So if you want to say I made or I did, you have to say yo hice, yo hice, okay? If you want to say you made or you did, then you have to say in Spanish, tú hiciste, tú hiciste. If you want to say he made or he did, then you have to say él hizo, él hizo. Okay, to say she did, you have to say ella hizo, ella hizo. To say it made or it did, then you have to say eso hizo, eso hizo. To say we did or we made, then you have to say nosotros hicimos, nosotros hicimos. To say you made or you did in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes hicieron, ustedes hicieron. And then if you want to say they did or they made, indefinite past, then you have to say ellos hicieron. If you are talking about a group of boys, ellos hicieron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas hicieron, ellas hicieron. Okay? And now we have this irregular verb, creer. Okay, creer means to believe. Okay, to believe. So now let's see how we have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. Okay, so if you want to say I believed, then you have to say yo creí, yo creí. Okay? If you want to say you believed, you have to say tú creíste, tú creíste. If you want to say he believed, you have to say él creyó, él creyó. To say she believed, you have to say ella creyó, ella creyó. To say it believed, you have to say eso creyó, eso creyó. To say we believed, you have to say nosotros creímos, nosotros creímos. Okay? To say you believed in the plural form, in Spanish you have to say ustedes creyeron, ustedes creyeron. And then if you want to say they believed, you have to say ellos creyeron. If you are referring to a group of boys, ellos creyeron. And if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas creyeron, ellas creyeron. Okay, so now let's see regular verbs ending with IR, ir. Ir. Okay, remember you have your personal pronoun, and then after that you have your verb with the root word, and then after that you have the ending of that verb, okay? So if you have the personal pronoun yo, the ending would be with letter I with an accent, I, okay? Now if your personal pronoun it's you, which means tú, the ending of your verb has to be with iste, iste. Okay? Now, if you have the personal pronouns he, él, she, ella, it, eso, the ending of your regular verb would be in I and letter O with an accent. Okay? Io, io. Now, if you have the personal pronoun we, which means nosotros, okay? The ending of your verb has to be with imos, imos, okay? Now, if you have the personal pronoun you in the plural form, the ending of your verb has to be with hieron, hieron, okay? The same with the personal pronoun they, which means ellos or ellas, okay, in Spanish. And the ending of your verb has to be with ieron. Ieron, okay? So let's see some verbs so you will understand this better, okay? So we have this verb to describe, okay? To describe means describir. Describir. Now let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past, okay? So if you want to say, I described, in Spanish you have to say, yo describí. Yo describí. Okay, as you can see, you have the same root word in all the personal pronouns, okay? That's why it's a regular verb. Yo describí, okay? And the ending it's with letter I with an accent, okay? According to the personal pronoun, yo. If you want to say, you described, then you have to say, tú describiste. Tú describiste. To say he described, you have to say, él describió. Él describió. To say she described, you have to say, ella describió. Ella describió. To say it described, you have to say, eso describió. Eso describió. To say we described, you have to say, nosotros describimos. Nosotros describimos. To say you described in the plural form, then you have to say, ustedes describieron. Ustedes describieron. Okay, you described. And then to say they described, you have to say, ellos describieron. If you're talking about a group of boys, ellos describieron. And if you're talking about a group of girls, then you have to say, ellas describieron. Ellas describieron. And now we have this verb to squeeze. Okay, to squeeze means exprimir. Exprimir. Okay, now let's see how we have to conjugate this verb in the indefinite past. If you want to say, I squeezed, then you have to say, yo exprimí. Yo exprimí. Okay, check the root word, it's exprim, and then the ending according to the personal pronoun you have, okay? If you want to say, you squeezed, then you have to say, tú exprimiste. Tú exprimiste. Okay, to say he squeezed, then you have to say, él exprimió. Él exprimió. To say she squeezed, then you have to say, ella exprimió. Ella exprimió. To say it squeezed, then you have to say, eso exprimió. Eso exprimió. To say we squeezed, then you have to say, nosotros exprimimos. Nosotros exprimimos. Now to say, you squeezed, in the plural form, then you have to say, ustedes exprimieron. Ustedes exprimieron. Now, if you want to say they squeezed, you have to say, ellos exprimieron. Ellos exprimieron, if you're talking about a group of boys, or ellas exprimieron. Ellas exprimieron, if you're talking about a group of girls, okay? Now, let's go to our regular verb ending with IR, ir. Okay? We have this verb to choose. Okay, to choose means elegir. Elegir. Okay? So now let's see how you have to conjugate this verb according to the indefinite past. Okay, remember it's an irregular verb. Okay? So if you want to say I chose, in Spanish you have to say, yo elegí. Yo elegí. Okay, check the root word. Eleg. Okay? Now according to the personal pronoun, you, which means tú, if you want to say you chose, you have to say, tú elegiste. Tú elegiste. Okay, as you can see, the first personal pronoun and the second personal pronoun, yo and tú, they have the same root word, okay? Now let's go to the third persons. To say he chose, in Spanish you have to say él eligió. Él eligió, okay? In this case, the root word is changing, okay? In the third persons, the root word would be elige, okay? Not eleg, as in the first and second personal pronoun, okay? So to say he chose, you have to say él eligió. To say she chose, you have to say ella eligió. Ella eligió. To say it chose, you have to say eso eligió. Eso eligió. Okay? And these third persons have the same root word. Okay? Now, if you want to say we chose, then you have to say nosotros elegimos. Nosotros elegimos. Okay? As you can see, this has the same root word as the first and second personal pronoun yo and tú. Okay, nosotros elegimos. Now, if you want to say you chose in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes eligieron. Ustedes eligieron, okay? The root word, it's the same as in the third persons, okay? Ustedes eligieron. Now, if you want to say they chose, in Spanish you have to say ellos eligieron. Ellos eligieron. If you're talking about a group of boys, or ellas eligieron. Ellas eligieron. If you are talking about a group of girls, okay? So it has the same root word as in the personal pronoun you in the plural form. Ustedes eligieron. Ellos eligieron. Ellas eligieron. Okay? And also in the third person, they use this root word. Okay? Now let's go to this verb to boil. Okay? To boil means in Spanish hervir. Hervir. Now let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. Okay? So if you want to say I boiled, then you have to say yo herví. Yo herví. Okay, and check the root word is the same in the first personal pronoun yo and the second personal pronoun tú, you. Okay, herv. Yo herví, I boiled, and you boiled, tú herviste. Tú herviste. Okay, now in the third persons, we have he boiled. Okay, so if you want to say he boiled, then you have to say él hirvió. Él hirvió. Okay, and check the root word. It's exactly the same in these three personal pronouns. Okay, the third persons. Él hirvió, irv, it's the root word. Ella hirvió, she boiled. Ella hirvió, okay, and it boiled. That means eso hirvió. Eso hirvió, okay? Now, if you want to say we boiled, in Spanish you have to say nosotros hervimos. Nosotros hervimos, okay? And the root word is exactly the same as in the first and second personal pronoun, okay? Yo, tú, nosotros, the same root word, okay? Now, if you want to say you boiled in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes hirvieron, okay? You boiled, ustedes hirvieron, okay? And check the root word, it's exactly the same as in the third persons, okay? Ustedes hirvieron. Exactly the same with the personal pronoun. They They boiled in Spanish means ellos hirvieron. Ellos hirvieron if you're talking about a group of boys, and ellas hirvieron if you are talking about a group of girls, okay? Okay, so now the next verb we have is to fry, okay? To fry in Spanish means freír, freír, okay? This is an irregular verb, so let's see how you have to conjugate this, okay? If you want to say, I fried, in Spanish you have to say, yo freí, okay? Check, the root word would be fre, okay? And it would be the same in the first personal pronoun, yo, I, and the second personal pronoun, tú, you, okay? Now, if you want to say you fried, in Spanish you have to say tú freíste, okay? You fried. Same root word in the first and the second personal pronouns, yo, tú, fre, okay? The root word. And then the ending according to the personal pronouns you have, okay? Now, if you want to say he fried, then you have to say él frió, okay? The root word would be letter F, R, okay? Letters F, R. That would be the root word in the third persons, okay? Now, if you want to say she fried, in Spanish you have to say ella frió, okay? The root word is the same, okay, as you can see. Now, if you want to say it fried, in Spanish you have to say eso frió. Now, to say we fried, you have to say nosotros freímos. Okay, and the root word would be fre. Okay, the same as in the personal pronouns yo, okay, and tú. Yo freí, tú freíste, okay, and then the same with the personal pronoun we, nosotros freímos, okay? Now, if you want to say you fried in the plural form, then in Spanish you have to say in the indefinite past, ustedes frieron. Okay, as you can see, the root word would be exactly as in the third persons, okay? Ustedes frieron. And then the same with the personal pronoun they. If you want to say they fried, in Spanish you have to say, if you're talking about a group of boys, ellos frieron. Okay, check the root word. It's exactly the same as in the third persons, and then with the personal pronoun ustedes, okay, frieron, and then they, ellos, if you talk about a group of boys, ellos frieron, okay? And then if you're talking about a group of girls, then you have to say, again, they fried. In Spanish, ellas frieron. Okay? All right, so now the next verb we have, a irregular verb, remember, is the verb to go. Okay, to go in Spanish means ir. Okay, and it's an irregular verb because when you are conjugating this, it doesn't have the same words, okay? Let's see so you will understand me. So if you want to conjugate in the indefinite past this verb to go, ir, okay, then you have to conjugate it in this way, okay? If you want to say you went, then you have to say yo fui. Okay, as you can see, it doesn't have the same words as ir. It's different. That's why it's an irregular verb, okay? If you want to say you went, then you have to say tú fuiste. Okay, check. The root word is the same. Yes, the root word is the same in all the personal pronouns. Fu, 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 okay? And then the ending is changing according to the personal pronoun you have, okay? But also it's different. That's why it's an irregular verb, okay? Now, if you want to say he went, you have to say él fue. To say she went, you have to say ella fue. Ella fue. To say it went, you have to say eso fue. Eso fue. To say we went, you have to say nosotros fuimos. Nosotros fuimos. To say you went in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes fueron. Ustedes fueron. And then if you want to say they went, if you are talking about a group of boys, you have to say ellos fueron. Ellos fueron. And if you are talking about a group of girls, then you have to say ellas fueron. Ellas fueron. And now we have this verb to come. Okay, to come, it's also an irregular verb. In Spanish means venir. Venir. Okay, let's see how you have to conjugate this in the indefinite past. If you want to say I came, okay, I came. In Spanish, you have to say yo vine. Yo vine. Okay, as you can see, the root word is the same, but the ending is not the same. Okay, that's why it's an irregular verb. So to say I came, you have to say yo vine. To say you came, you have to say tú viniste. Tú viniste. To say he came, you have to say él vino. Él vino. Okay, the same if you want to say she came, you have to say ella vino. Ella vino. To say it came, you have to say eso vino. Eso vino. To say we came, you have to say nosotros vinimos. Nosotros vinimos. To say you came in the plural form, then you have to say ustedes vinieron. Ustedes vinieron. And then if you want to say they came, if you are referring to a group of boys, you have to say ellos vinieron. Ellos vinieron. And if you are referring to a group of girls, then you have to say ellas vinieron. Ellas vinieron. Alright, so that would be all for today's lesson. I really hope it helped you. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!